Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Allegra Jaffe and I am a caregiver specialist with Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. You should have received an email this morning with the speaker slides, so you'll have them for future reference. We will also allocate a few minutes at the end of the presentation for you to submit your questions by typing it into the question box on your panel. Today's presentation is being recorded, and a recording will be sent to all registrants by early next week. There will be a brief survey as you sign out, so please help us by giving us your feedback. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker and instructor, Dr. Kate McCarty. Dr. Kate is a gerontologist and dementia care coach whose personal and clinical experiences include over 40 years of creating quality of life for individuals with dementia. She has a master's degree in thanatology from Hood College and holds a doctorate in aging studies from University of South Florida with a focus on dementia. Having returned to her native state of Maryland during COVID, Dr. Kate is loving virtual work where she's coaching individuals and families, offering support groups, memory cafes, and webinars. Dr. Kate's mission is to create a world where all those living with dementia thrive with well-being, resilience, security, and above all, hope. Dr. Kate is going to share her experience with us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Kate, and welcome.
Thank you, Allegra. I haven't quite, there we are. There I am. Oh, can you see me?
Not yet. I think, let's see. We gotta click the video button. Let's see if we can. There we are. Welcome, wow. Dr. Kate.
Thank you. What a great opportunity. I appreciate all you who have joined us today. You know, the thing about arts and crafts is, for a lot of us, those two titles kind of put fear in our heart. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about staging and memory and how we can capture that using an artistic methodology, kind of an outside of the box. And Allegra really challenged me when she asked me to do things that were in the house, because my house has a lot of things that many houses don't have in them. So this was really good practice for me. I'm going to go ahead and ask somebody to switch the slide for me, Juliana. Why would we do memory engagement through arts and crafts? We are trying to capture so much of what was in the past. We are trying to increase their well-being, and the research totally supports this idea that the longer we keep our brains engaged, the higher sense of well-being, both care partners. So that's whether you're the caregiver or the care receiver. Now we call them care partners, but that we increase well-being and satisfaction with life, which probably is not hard to imagine. If we look back into our past life, it was the engaging things that kept us happy. It wasn't the, dead silence, nothing going on for long periods of time. And it wasn't the television, really. If you look back on your life, television had some role, but hopefully not your total presence. These are some supplies to consider to have while you are working with someone with memory loss, and that's a long journey. So for some of us, that's 10, 20 years. Wi-Fi, and I am assuming everybody has that because we're here. There's a lot to be had and gained from looking at even what we call coloring sheets. And I say that very carefully. We are not buying children's coloring books, but if I had to type in, and of course my computer now knows me well, apples and honey, I will get all kinds of adult color sheets. So they're not like dancing apples. And that goes back to where I want to talk about staging. So the dancing apple's not a bad thing if a person's further along. But for many of us, we are just showing up. We just realize we have a diagnosis of dementia. It's usually mild cognitive impairment. And at that stage, don't be giving me a child's thing to do. I'm not going to do that. But if I give you a really nicely printed, and a printer helps, right, picture of apples in a harvest basket and a nice selection of color instruments, not crayons, then I might do that. And some of you probably have done this with the adult coloring books. One of the caveats about adult coloring books is that as our brain changes, even in mild cognitive impairment, which is that first stage of 7, that would be the 3, we aren't able to do the very complex, very small lines. It's too much. We can't stay in the lines. And if you have grandchildren or your children, or maybe even you remember your own self, staying in the lines was a lot of pressure until a certain age. And then all of a sudden you were staying in the lines. This goes back to this idea of time travel. So if we have 7 stages, and that's when the functional assessment staging tool, which is an academically ordained, validated tool to look at how people regress in dementia world, and I mean an umbrella of all kinds of dementia, this staging tool captures it in general, then we're looking at people that are in a stage 6 or even 7 who would need a much simpler process. So as the person does, and the fancy word for this is retrogenesis, but we call it time travel. That's much easier. So as we move back in time with our abilities, we simplify our task. So in arts and crafts, and some of you have your supplies, I'm reaching for mine. In early stages, we would maybe color with coloring pencils. And as time goes on, we would go towards a smaller marker. This one's really cool because it has a scent too, so I can smell as well. But a marker, you don't have to be as exact as you are with a pencil. And then in later stages, we're going to go for the big, easy to hold marker. And we want the picture to be the dancing apple, because we're just talking a big red apple. Well, you get to color it what color you want with some feet. Where early stages, we would be doing the very fine art with the colored pencils, harvest basket, etc. On my list here, you'll see that I have watercolors. Watercolors are fairly forgiving, particularly if you have watercolor paper, because it sort of sucks it up. One of the things I fell in love with years ago, and I still work with today on my own, are watercolor pencils. The watercolor pencil is strong because you don't have to use water. So that 2-step of dipping something and then getting it to the paper can be complex. You'll still get color from a watercolor pencil. But if a person is a heavy dipper into the water, you have a little more control. So it's a fun media to try. Most important, and I won't say this enough in this short time, it's not about what the thing looks like. It's about the process of doing it. It's about feeling good about it, doing it. Process, not product. That's been drilled into me. I drill it into all my memory engagement specialists. It's not about what comes out. It's about that we had fun doing it. And I think that's very important. Safety scissors. I do have some scissors here. Mine are a little bolder. They have the long point, which I would definitely want a little more blunt scissor. But safety scissors are available. This is a perfect time of year, by the way. I always overstock myself on these items because it's back to school special. And then there's so much that can be done with magazines, collages. When we get to the stage 6, we see that a Montessori method works. That could be sorting. So taking that cardstock that you all brought to the table today and maybe cutting it into small index cards or having index cards, and then literally going to your magazine and ripping stuff out. You could do sorting of boys versus girls, cats, dogs. These are all things that we will dive into a little bit more. And magazines are really useful for scavenger hunts. That sounds crazy, but literally you can say, hey, who's the first person I'll race you, see if we can find a dog. Now, the magazine I brought today is the Audubon, and I don't think I'm going to find a dog in it, but these are things that we can do. Can we have the next slide? Because I think this is very important to realize that, yeah, we can have all the bells and whistles in the world, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? We know, and I'm sharing with you, that the research supports that an active person in dementia world slows down the cognitive decline. The caveat is, how do we keep them active? And it's got to be selective. Like if I were to throw you into a Bob Ross painting workshop, there's a chance that would be successful, but because it's not very much tailored to your abilities, then there's a bigger chance it won't be successful. So part of that is tailoring. I love the word tailored. We want a tailored approach. So this is why, you don't want to just throw somebody into the ceramics course and hope for the best. Lots of reasons that doesn't work out, and that's for another seminar. But what's really important is that we don't say, do you want to do some crafts? That's not going to work out so well. Instead, let's do this. But before you say, let's do this, because as you gather supplies, you're given a lot of reasons to say no. You have things ready. You have things in front of you already laid out. Or I could really use your help with this. Lots of us are wired to be helpers, thank heavens, right? And because we're wired to be helpers, or because I really love you because you're my spouse and you're going to cook my dinner, then I'll help you because dinner's right around the corner. So how we approach things. Could we have the next slide? This is really important because, like I said, arts and crafts can be, glaze over, please, what are you doing to me? They can be dirty words. I think it's important to look at art as expression. Also, that's not for the engineers that we're caring for. They don't want to hear about expression. But we can make it very geometric, very logical for an engineer, but it's a way to get outside ourselves. And I have found the art can be very helpful in expressing feelings. When I give a person, like a group of people with dementia, a selection of colors, it's very telling what they're drawn to. Some people are doing all black, some people are all doing blue, and then we get to kind of piece that out a little bit. So I think we have to look at it not necessarily as it's going to be a well mixed, well placed picture or piece of art, but there's something being expressed. And I think that's important. As we change in our cognition, we are often unable to express ourselves, whether the words are wrong, the words aren't coming, or we never really were great at communication. We see a lot of that as well. Then art can give us that little bit of outlet. And this is where personality plays. And I mentioned the engineer. I live with an engineer who has early stages of dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And I'm not going to get him to sit down and do a piece of abstract art. But I do see some real finessing when it comes to something that seems practical. The practicalities. I see we have a lady that only does flower arrangement. Only flower arrangement for other people. This is for your daughter, or this is for your friend. See, we've involved purpose. So arts and crafts has to be broken down. So the title alone can be a little off-putting. That idea of purpose often plays out with if the person has a strong sense of a need to help children. For many years, we used to do bookmarks for the children at school that were learning to read. Now, of course, they have their tablets, so they don't need a bookmark, but bookmarks were easy. And it was a way we do a lot of cards, greeting cards. And they are literally, because of stage, there's only their first name being written on the card. And so we see that has another way to get a person expressing is through that sense of purpose. So let's do our next slide, and I'm going to ask my helpers to come on because I like to be interactive. This is our paper, so paper essentials. So I want you to all take your piece of paper, and I'm going to do a little bit of distracting here. I'm going to put it down on my page. And the first thing you see, you have this blank piece of paper. I'm going to ask you each to draw something on this paper that makes you think of the season. I'm going to do it as well, and we're going to play a game of Pictionary. Now, granted, that's a game. Some people hate the word game. But even if you didn't draw it, but you're guessing it, then we've made headway on creativity. And you might surprise me and really use your whole crayon box, even though there are no crayons. There are no crayons in Dr. Kate's Arts and Crafts, but you may use many colors to create what you're going to draw. And I'm going to attempt this, and I'll be honest, I'm not very good at art. So I'm going to attempt this along with you and see if you can guess what I'm drawing. So I want everybody in our audience to do a little bit, something that makes you think of the season. And since a lot of us are Virginia and Marylanders, if we have the Floridians on, we might have to do hurricanes or something. But because we are up here in the Northeast, there may be some things that we can guess that are common. And this is going to show you process, not product, because mine is so rough looking. And don't overthink it, Allegra and Juliana, because, you know, we want it to be fun. And that's the other thing, is to watch your care partner very closely. And if it becomes angsty, oh, let's not do this. You know, you want to simplify it, take it away, regroup. We're here to answer any of those kinds of questions, by the way, because I'll be honest, I know this is maybe a political statement, but it does take a village. We can't do this on our own. And it's other people's ideas that keep us going. So I'm ready with mine. Does anybody get an idea of what I just drew?
Pineapple?
Oh, and that totally matches Allegra's shirt, and of course she's a Floridian, kind of, but now I'm thinking more, and I just had this with butter all over it.
Can you pull it out a little bit, Dr. Kate? Is it an acorn?
Well, it's an ear of corn. I know, but...
It's a corn. Okay, yeah. I see it now.
My ears of corn were looking that rough. I mean, they did. We had fun with the garden, but it had. So let's see, Juliana, she used colors. Oh, nice.
Oh.
Falling leaves.
All time trees.
Yes. What have you used for us, Miss Pineapple Lady? Oh, look at that. Beautiful. Yes. See? And see how the color adds to it, where my little, maybe if I had done yellow and green, it would have been easier for you to figure out.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
Dr. Kate, I have a quick question for you. So you were mentioning a lot about the stages of dementia. Could you kind of quickly talk a little bit about those stages?
Yeah, I was kicking myself for not sending you the functional assessment staging tool. I could send it to you and you could send it out to the people.
Absolutely.
It is put together in the 80s, which sounds archaic when you're in research, but it is the most validated, academically sound tool to use. It's functional assessment staging tool, also known as the FAST scale. If you took any psychology, you may remember Freud, with probably eye rolls, but basically we start at stage 1, which is normal adult, normal cognition. Stage 2, we see a little difference, but not enough that anybody notices, and many time care partners like hide or able to compensate. 3 is where it becomes more like, I can no longer plan a dinner party. I loved that part of the scale. It's like, how many people really even plan the dinner party? But you may not have that higher end processing. And then the rubber meets the road at 4. So there are 7 stages. At 4 is where we begin to see an inability, getting lost a little bit. And I wrote it down because I always forget. Let me go back and pay time here. Stage 4 This is the most important part in my psychosocial world of these stages. You're moving back in time as far as your ability to process emotion. So you'll see a lot of behaviors as time goes on, just like you did when you were raising your children, or you were a child. You were off the chain at like 4:30 to 5 o'clock when you were 4 years old, hungry, thirsty, tired, and your mother took you to the store. Good chance you were going to get walloped back in the day. Now, we don't do that, but there was a good chance there was going to be trouble, right? So it's important when we look at how people change in behaviors. So at stage 7, we have the abilities of less than a 1-year-old. In a lot of ways, we may not be walking. We may not be feeding ourselves. We certainly aren't cutting things up with a knife and fork. It's just fork or it's just spoon. So our abilities are moving back, and with arts and crafts, we do that as well. So I have a woman who is very, everybody changes differently. She still can tell me her name, and she tells all the social chit chat, but she can't process a lot. So we have her sorting things. We'll give her a box of buttons. We would not give a person a box of buttons when they were staging at 6 and 7, unless we were very aware, because they might eat them, because they look like candy. And I brought my picture here somewhere to show you yeah, I'll find it here in a minute. But we want to be careful what we put out in front of people depending on their stage. So think about a pen and how small it is. Allegra, I'm a lot older than you, but when we were kids, they gave us fat pencils. They weren't little pencils. They were the fat one, right? Because you could grip it. That's why we go from colored pencil to thin marker to large marker, because it's more. And then even then, I may be, and I'm a lefty, because notice I'm doing the southpaw thing. You may be pushing down hard, right? So that would be another reason to use cardstock instead of paper, because you'll put a hole in the paper, right? So as they move down in stages, they're going, so at stage 6, depending on what level, 6 is where people usually lose control of either bowel or bladder. And that is a staging between a 2 and a 5-year-old. This is much more immediate gratification. This has no patience. We're certainly not going to sit through an hour class, but I can usually get 20 minutes out of you. And so we gauge our, I think that, slicing apples with a butter knife is a creative activity. I think, tearing lettuce counts as a creative activity, right? Particularly because you're doing it for the family and you've got the sense of purpose. But so we have to change our expectations and even what it looks like. This is an example of my granddaughter, and one was Mother's Day. That was May, and this was her idea of a nicely decorated a pot for me. And you see it says Granny. You see the irregularity of the writing, and that's changed already because she's moving up in cognition and processing. And yeah, so there's a lot of changes that happen in reverse. Time travel is an easy, lovely term. It sounds nice, right? As opposed to retrogenesis, and you're going progressively backwards. So does that help? Getting back to our paper. Okay, now I want you to make a paper airplane. These, believe it or not, many of us did this in school. We made paper airplanes. And if you were a vicious child, you would find a pin to put in there. Believe it or not, that was a Baltimore thing. I grew up in Baltimore, and we were somewhat vicious. And you can make a paper airplane any way you want. I'm not saying that mine's going to be good. In fact, I've already confused myself. I'll think about this here. Oh, now I got it. Ah, yes, now I remember how I do it. What's surprising about this when I do it with my memory cafes, everyone pretty much has a memory of making paper airplanes. We can also do origami. Believe it or not, we do wonderful things with paper at in winter, making snowflakes. Everybody has made snowflakes. And see, I'm just using the same piece of paper I used for my Pictionary. I'm going to give him some tail feathers. And you can cast this if people are very competitive. I'm very competitive, so I'm going to say that I'm going to cast it as who can make the best paper airplane. But while we're doing this, I'm also talking about airplanes, and I'm kind of a little bit appalled of how many people I work with that were pilots. I wonder if it was the jet fuel. I have no idea. But it's like there's a lot of pilots that have dementia. So mine doesn't look very good, but it is a paper airplane. You see it? Yeah. How about yours? Let's see yours, Allegra. There you go. Yeah. You going to try flying it? Because I'm pretty sure mine's going to nosedive.
Kind of
pretty good. Let's see yours. Juliana, let's see yours. Ah, oh, look at her. She's got the stealth bomber there. Nice. Try flying it.
I don't think this is gonna fly. It's just for the show.
And you can decorate that. You can talk about the Red Baron. You can do a lot of reminiscence around airplanes, like what seat would you like to sit in? Do you remember when you could smoke on planes? Horrifying, but there are lots of memories of that. You could, back in the day, Allegra, you could smoke on planes, right? So let's start a new piece of paper. And I'm going to try something new with a piece of paper. So, this is interesting because I have noticed as people move in stages, early stage, when you say, let's make a card, they do this. They do this, and they'll do that extra step to make it a really nice little Hallmark card, right? Oops, like that. But when they're coming along stage 5, they do this. I mean, I should have done a recreation therapy degree because then I would know why this is. But you see, there's a complexity here that is not here. This is simpler. And that's when we say we want to simplify things, simpler, right? And then you will also see as the simpler approach that they will put their name in the wrong place, or they'll put the picture on the inside and their name on the outside. So there's some processing changes that happen. Doesn't matter because I've still made a card. I make a card for a cousin with a birthday, or for the homeless shelter, or for whatever that is that you make a card for. I get an awful lot of success and memory engagement with cards. Now, last Christmas or last holiday, Allegra and I did a Harvesting Memories, and we made a card with the buttons, and that is something we could do right now. I'm going to pull up your magazine, if you have a magazine with you. And of course, I am the Audubon girl, so I not only have the Audubon magazine, but I also have the calendar. And calendars are wonderful things because people cut, or if you don't have scissors, you can tear out a nice picture. You see this picture here? Isn't that lovely? And I could see a card that would say, I love you, that just has these 2 little heads on it, right? And I'm going to be bold and destroy my calendar and show you that you can rip it. Oh, I just ripped his neck. Oh, well. He won't be necking now. So here's my little love card. Now, if I'm going to be a perfectionist, which is never a good idea in dementia world, perfection there's no room for it. But if I were, I would do this and make it all jaggedy so it looked like it fit in the Dali Museum, right? And because you see my picture so big, I'm going to have to do the simplified card just to make it work. I put that there. And then I am going to reach for my glue. Pardon my reach, because I am going to be searching here. This is a very favorite glue, available at the dollar store, which I think is always fun if you don't mind risking a little bit. Tacky glue, because it doesn't run everywhere. But one of the things I found that is magical are glue dots. They just come off like a sheath, like our stamps used to come off. And now the hard part about glue dots, they haven't quite started work with Dementia World yet. Wouldn't this be great if each of these circles was purple, like the purple glue that Elmer's does for kids to see whether the glue is dry? The other magical thing is, of course, glue sticks. I gotta find my glue stick. Well, I'm missing. I'm also very fond of double-sided tape, because you see, I can make this so simple by just now, my beautiful. And then, because I'm gonna make this an anniversary card, how's it going there, Juliana? You making a card, Allegra?
Yes, yes.
And sometimes the caregiver has to write the sentiment. And I have to be honest, I have some of my favorite treasures are cards from people with dementia, because they will tell you everything. I have a card that my ladies that lived at a little place over here in Silver Spring made for me when my father died. My father's been gone probably 17 years, but I hide it. When I find it, it warms my heart. And then I put it in another book that I'll find someday in the future, right? And in that card, it says, yes, indeed, it does say sorry for your loss, which is the appropriate sentiment for a sympathy card, right? But it also says happy anniversary, congratulations, happy birthday, we love you, wish you were here. All of those sentiments, because it didn't matter. They put their love into the card. That's, again, that process, not the product. It doesn't matter. And that's sometimes the hardest part for those of us in caregiving roles, is to let go and let them be successful. Don't go behind them. And yeah, and of course, then if you have somebody like my husband who goes behind you, letting go of that as well. So that is an example of a greeting card that, you could just hang it on their refrigerator. You put a sentiment. It always is nice to see people still being able to write their name, but honestly, that goes pretty quickly. Think to your school days and when you were able to write your full name. Depending on your last name, Allegra, you got off easy. Juliana, you had a much harder time learning how to write your darn name, because you have a really long name. Look at all those letters you had to remember. So in time, you might be more likely to put Juliana, right? Let's see your card again. I totally missed it. Nice. Cool. Oh, it's a dog. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Perfect. And, Juliana, that could be a flashcard. So I could put dog and cat and separate them. And look at your flowers. Beautiful. Thinking of you. Perfect. Right?
I was also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention, I was also thinking that these are actually very good pieces of conversation, especially when people have memory impairments. Sometimes it might be very hard for family caregivers to engage in conversation. And so I find that having these type of images, or really any, like you both had, can be a really good piece of just talking about the past or something memorable.
That's beautiful. That's the magazines. People throw away old magazines. It was a pet peeve of mine. I would collect all the Christmas ones and hide them until November. Because come on, it's September. Come on, you guys. But I like to have a seasonal magazine selection. But old magazines are beautiful because you can talk about dogs, or you can make art out of it. You can do those kinds of things. So very, very good. Now I also wanted to pull out your coffee filter. Another piece of paper. Not everybody has a coffee filter. I wanted to show this to you because it is one of those magical things that can happen. So take a coffee filter and then take your markers and just do a lot of marking on your coffee filter. And if you are like some people, you're going to make it really heavy. Let me find some other colors here. And these coffee filters make all kinds of things, angels, and they can make butterflies, and that's what we'll work on with our ties. Let me get a little pink.
If we don't have a coffee filter, Kate, can we just use a piece of paper for this?
A piece of tissue paper? Yes, like one of, I would thin the napkin, like not where it's all folded, but you know, the cheap ones that come with takeout.
Yes,
you can do that.
Yes.
So the goal is you want to get enough color on here that then when you drip some water on it, it spreads. Now, the cheap napkin, you got to be careful with the dripping water because you'll have a holy napkin. But on a coffee filter, you can drip some water on this, and I'm going to get ready to if I can get my cap back on. And you'll see that it kind of becomes like a tie-dye, and you'll see how adaptive I am because I don't really have water here, but I do have an ice cube. Right? So it's starting to spread a little bit, like a little tie-dye. You see how the bleeding is going on with the. This can be done, of course, with so many of the Pinterest things will use food coloring, but you can just use your markers. So when this dries, which I'm going to switch to a dry one, it won't be as pretty. Get your, and of course, as I said, Allegra, my house has lots of interesting things. Chenille sticks, which we used to call pipe cleaners back in the day. You just take that or a bread tie. And I think I told Juliana I suggested she use a paper clip. So let me use a paper clip. If you have a paper clip, I've got a colored one here, and you want to open it up, Juliana. Now, I mean, I know this sounds like busy work, guys, but I think it's important that people feel useful. Even just making a paper clip chain is something of value. I don't know if you remember being in school and making juicy fruit gum chains. There was a certain folding pattern that we did. Now here is my butterfly. You see I've taken my coffee filter. This could be a napkin or a tissue even. But you know, in thinking about it, I bet you could use a facial tissue because they make them so strong. So strong that men don't like you to flush them down the toilet because they don't dissolve. So that would be good for the art, the sprinkling after I'm doing the color. So see, I'm going to take the twisty bread tie or chenille stick, much easier to bend. And Juliana, you see what I'm doing? I'm going to twist it just in the middle so that my butterfly has wings. And I can, you know, add a piece of magnetic tape to it to put it on the doorstop, or I can use the end of the, not the doorstop, the refrigerator, or I can use the end of the chenille stick or the bread tie to stick it in a cork board. But you see, I have made a butterfly. Now it'll be a much prettier butterfly. This one is cabbage, a cabbage butterfly. They're only white. Right. Go ahead.
Dr. Kate, someone asked from the audience, can you also use a paper towel?
I would think you could probably, yeah, you wouldn't have the like roundedness, but I'm not sure that that's important. It's the process, again, not the product. And a paper towel, you would want to do more of the magic marker, like more color. This is where food coloring comes in great, because think about it, it's going to go, which is why watercolor paper works so well with watercolors. You know, it kind of spreads. You could as well use watercolors on this. That would be a way. And I'm not gonna crumple this. Well, I could, but it's still drying. That's the hard part about this, is you have to let it dry. It could be a 2-day process, right? And right here. Now, the other thing with, I wouldn't suggest bread ties, but if you want to go bold and buy yourself some pipe cleaners, like I said, old school thinking, now they're called chenille sticks. You can make flowers really simply. Just see, we're just taking that and we're just looping it. And, you know, this isn't a perfect flower, but it works really well. And I had one of my memory engagement people do this today. You stick it in here and you've got yourself a little flower arrangement, right? This too, now the red tie is not long enough and neither is the paper clip, but this could be a little napkin holder, like if you were having a picnic and the kids were coming over or the family was coming, your person with dementia could make the napkin rings. And you see, we just make that ring and stick a napkin in there. You could do that with, it would be harder to do this with turkeys, but I bet you we can figure it out, or widgets or something. But we've got to think outside the box for this to really work. So that's a good thing with on the Wi-Fi usage. There are many sources of hidden pictures, much like our old I can't think of the name of it. It was in the doctor's offices. It's craft is in the name, but they would have hidden pictures. You can find those, print those out, and have the person circle it. You see, a lot of times we lose, think about when we gained our ability to read words was like 6, 7, and 8, but we can still recognize pictures. And so printing out a colored picture and having them circle the hidden word. When we look at our card stock, and I'm not sure how are we doing for time. Good?
We're good. We're good.
Okay, so a mosaic can have anything on it. This is something we did in one of our memory cafes. This I would be very careful because those are just small buttons and they look a lot like Skittles. If you think it's somebody that's going to eat your buttons, by all means use Skittles, right? We don't care if you eat the art, it's good, right? But see, this was just something printed out with the heart shape already right off the printer, and then we used the glue dots and the buttons. Now this wouldn't exactly, this is very orchestrated, right? But when we do take a piece of cardstock and you put in front of the person various and sundry things, here's my various and sundry. You might start with a picture, and I'm going to go to my magazine. You guys, you working with me? Go ahead and get your cardstock out. And let's see if you can use your glue. I got a beautiful picture. Nobody's ever going to read this book again.
Dr. Kate, what I really like about these activities, besides engaging the brain, is also that people have the opportunity to continue to work on their motor skills, especially with their fingers. That part is so important, I think.
Yes, it's so true. And like the buttons, if a person can't, because neuropathy is very much present in dementia world, particularly when there's diabetes afoot, these may be too small to pick up. So we go for bigger buttons, we go for a bigger picture, right? Now I happen to find this picture in my Audubon, and it's already looking collagey, right? And I'm tearing it because, to be honest, I'm not really fond of sharp edges. I never have been. I think it qualifies me for being fluffy. So I'm just tearing mine, but you might want to use a pair of scissors. And again, safety scissors, you can't really cut yourself with those. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the middle of my pretty piece of purple here. And you can get a nice pack of cardstock with multiple colors at your local Walmart. And I'm going to stick with you, although I love my glue dots. One of the downsides of glue dots is if your environment gets hot, your little things that you've added start dropping off. I noticed that last Christmas with one of our things. It's like, wait a minute, my elf lost his eyes. Right? So I'm going to put a little glue down here, and you can have a lot of fun with glue. One of the things that I avoid like the plague, of course, is glitter, but glitter's a blast. We like glitter glue pens, very popular at my house. I've got a 6-year-old granddaughter, and so we're always glitter gluing things. But so I'm going to do that, and then she will be very upset with me, but see, there's some starburst here. And I like to have depth to my picture. Now, a person with dementia is probably not going to be able to tell me what that's about, but I'm going to add these. It'll save her from having sugar reactions. And what are you using in your collage there, Allegra?
So far, I have a heart out of cereal from the Honey Nut Cheerios commercial ad. So should I, in this collage, can I just keep using magazine photos if I don't have?
Of course. Think about people making vision boards. When I was doing a great group called Mega Vita, My Life, we would do what do you want out of life? Vision boards. And believe it or not, it was very telling, and people were able to express themselves through the art. And it was only magazines and glue. That's all we provided. I am an eclectic thinker. I just found that out from my daughter-in-law sent me designing my living room, and she said, "Oh, your style is eclectic." I should have known that. And I like depth. So I'm adding, see, I've got a shell. I'm going to add a shell to this. But if you wanted to, and if people, depending on their thinking, I should have brought it. I actually have coasters that are mosaic tile coasters that you just lay it down, and then you take a butter knife and you smear that plaster right on top, let it dry, and you've got yourself a coaster. It actually has a glue-on piece of cork on the bottom. So that has been really fun. We've done that a few times with folks with dementia. Oh my, maybe I'm going to do some really trendy paper clip art. Maybe this is going to be the sun. And then I have random buttons that are from, St. Patrick's Day. So you see how that could look. I'm not going to finish gluing it all down. But again, if your person is low tolerance, not going to be like, oh yeah, I want to do arts and crafts, have the stuff ready. That's kind of the key to success. Same way with bathing and showering. Don't get me in there and then run away to go find my lotion, because I'm not staying. You've just stripped me and I'm out of here. So you want things to be set up, which is a lot to ask in dementia world, which is why we often have people come in to do it, because it's a lot. But these are little ways. In one of what I have found is that it really helps when you do it with the grandkids. We're doing it for the grandkids. That's something we want to do, whether it's dyeing eggs or, cutting up apples to make applesauce. Those are things that you can do. Juliana, do you have a collage thing to show us? You don't have to pick it up if it's dangerous. Oh, nice. Very nice. Oh, look at you. You're very animal focused, Juliana. What kind of magazine are you using? Veterinary Today. I know, right?
This is a magazine that comes from my school, UND. So it's rural. So I think that's why.
That's nice. And look at Juliana. She's much more linear. Or you see, I'm like
organized.
Right. Can you see, that's an imperfect thing to note, that sometimes our style annoys the person we're working with, like greatly. Like I can tell you that I know at least one lady that would say, okay, get this together. This is a mess, because it's abstract and it's kind of like you threw up on paper. Sorry, that was graphic. But where some people are much more linear, those are the folks that you're going to do better with the Duplo, plumber's pipe, much more linear kind of art products. There's a great kit of magnetic rods that you can build things out of. There are tanagrams where they're really geometric pieces of plastic that you lay on a form that already has the form there. And so it's helping the brain match with color and shape. So there's a lot of cognitive benefit depending on how it's approached. I tend to be more psychosocial, so I'm looking for your feelings. And that's really hard to get from my husband, who is an engineer. All right, so it's important to see that difference. Okay, so enough on our paper. So our collages, I kind of slipped into that. You might be a natural person. I think it's important to capture a person's childhood, if that makes sense. Because in time travel, you may right now be living in downtown New York, for example. But if you grew up in Puerto Rico, you're thinking, and Allegra's top makes me think of this very clearly. You're much more of a tropical thinker. So if you give me a bunch of pine cones and pictures of fall leaves, it's not going to mean the same to me as if you gave me pictures of the beach. And biography and preferences work hand in hand. So if I have never done a glue dot, then maybe the glue dot isn't the way to go, but I may be more comfortable with tape or, Elmer's glue. Elmer's is runny, but I know what it is and I can relate to that. So we're always kind of gearing to and that can be really challenging because like today I had a group of pig farmers. Literally, everybody had a pig farming story. Now the topic was museums, but we went into what it was like to work in a slaughterhouse, what the pigs smelled like, why they smelled different, and we eventually got to museums. But you see, it's so much where meeting them where they're at or where they were. It was really interesting the other day we were talking about bathrooms and half the people on the call had an outhouse. So no memory care is going to have that. That's the good news. I know we don't do that, but yeah, it's how you're thinking about things that matters.
And
okay.
Dr. Kate, I did want to let everyone know we have about 9 minutes left. So if you do have any last minute questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box and we will get to those. And we did have a few other questions that came in, Dr. Kate.
Good.
Someone wanted to know, is reminiscing a good thing and how much should you reminisce with somebody? Is there such thing as too much reminiscing?
Depending on the diagnosis, frontal temporal people tend to need less of it because they have so many more recent memories, I guess. It really depends on the person. I err on the side of heavy reminiscence. But I watch. You see, I have a very, very expressive face. And you'll know when I'm distracted or you're losing me. So watching, and I'm not always great at it. I have a Vietnam vet that joined me, and for a long time he was being very humorous about that. And all of a sudden one day I hit a chord and I apologized and I backed up and I never touched Vietnam again because I'm not going to risk that. I'm not going to risk. He's got to bring it to me. I'm not going to take it to him. So sometimes there's tough stuff. I mean, not everybody has happy family memories, for example, but they, so I'm trying to find, and a magazine's a perfect way to get there, seeing what they like, and the family helps immensely knowing what dad or mom likes, what they respond well to. But yes, reminiscing, I think is very powerful because I still remember. But if they're saying I can't remember and they get this angsty look up here, stop. And then maybe just introduce senses like, here's a fresh apple. Ever have an apple tree? And see what comes up, right? Right. You can tell I'm very apple focused today.
Yeah, we had another question come in as well, and they wanted to know, how important is it to get deeper clarification of your loved one's diagnosis or stage? Will it completely change the way you react or interact with your loved one?
There are two cases where it seems very important. Lewy body dementia has a very different trajectory and a very different medication regime than other dementias. So that's a good one to know about. often related to Parkinson's. So you've got other indicators often, not always. It is a very unique presentation. And frontal temporal, that some of the medications that we use for Alzheimer's, like dementias, which is this huge catch-all, then they don't work well for these people. Those are the two big red flags. One is much easier to catch than the other. Frontal temporal is often misdiagnosed. But once you have an idea and you're getting read, I'm not sure you need to keep going back to the well and seeing where you're at. If you're tuned into what the scale is, I mean, I train people who are just high school diploma resident caregivers, and they can tell me stages because of that scale. It's just that simple. And I don't say that in a diminishing way, but you know you're here when this is happening. And I think it's probably more important in the case of driving, those things, you know. Yeah, that helps.
When someone is starting to show signs of memory loss, what would you suggest as first steps?
One of the things that I like to do, and actually had our good friend Nicole do for us, I had my husband screened with the BCAT, which is a brief cognitive assessment. It's a battery of assessments done virtually in our case. And it's a strongly academically validated set of tools. So we were able to catch things that the 4-hour neuropsychology test never caught. So that was impressive. And
is that done by a doctor as well? Could you just go to your physician, and is that what they would do?
No, they don't use that one. Often they'll use a mini mental, which is fairly weak. It's not used very well. It has what we call a floor effect. If you went to a memory care, probably 80–90% of the people there would be a 0 on the mini mental. That's not useful. So yeah, the staging and the BCAT. So I just did one this morning with someone, and we saw significant change. We're using that for the family who is not being reasonable with expectations, right? So in that way, it can be useful. Thank you, Juliana.
Okay. Let's see. Juliana, did you have any other questions that you saw on your side?
I do, but I also wanted to read a couple of comments that people sent. Someone said that my dad and I watch all movies together, and he would tell me stories about his life, and other things. And then he told me a story about how he and, sorry, this part right here is a little bit challenging to read. He and mom met that I have never heard. So, yeah.
Yes, the movie was an entree into the reminiscence, and that's what we use with memory engagement. I feel like we're like investigators, and we're digging around to find that one thing. Like, we now know one lady loves Barbra Streisand and James Taylor. Forget others. Those are her two big ones. But we wouldn't have known that had we not tried. So you're very much an investigator, and that's the way it is with movies as well. That's nice.
So let me ask you very quickly, I think we might have a minute or two. My question is, how does the brain relate to keeping your mind active through art, through the arts, or through crafts and things like that? What's the relationship there?
Well, I can only say what we are seeing, the association, because research is that way. We need more longitudinal research where we're following a person's art trajectory and their cognition throughout 20 years, but we don't have that right now. But what we do see is that people who are relating through art, even in like interpretive music, dancing, we see that they are much happier, which my dad, who had a 4th grade education, would say, well, that's a duh. Right? Of course they are, right? So, but they, you know, it gives more life satisfaction, more sense of well-being. I cannot fathom, and I hope I don't have to, but I cannot fathom what it's like to get this diagnosis. And if anybody's willing to work with me to give me quality of life, praise God, right? I mean, that's a wonderful thing. That's where I'm all geared to quality. I will take quality over quantity every darn time. Now, not everybody's wired that way, but sometimes in my father-in-law's case, we got to know him on a level we never would have known had he not had Alzheimer's. He was very dignified, very private. He had a security clearance and he couldn't tell you anything. But over time, Alzheimer's, and we see it in the grandchildren. The older grandchildren do not remember him as a warm fuzzy, and the younger ones loved him to death. And that was that time travel that happened. So yeah, there's a lot of good that can be had. The glass is refillable. It's just we have to be creative in how to refill it.
Thank you. And we're getting to wrap up. And as you sign out, there will be a brief survey. So please take a moment to answer those questions and help us provide topics that you're interested in. We also wanted to invite you to our next health and wellness webinar, which is art therapy, healing through art, on Friday, September 24th from 2 to 3 p.m. Dr. Kate, thank you so much for your valuable information and for giving us your time and your knowledge. And to everyone in our audience, thank you for being here, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Take care.